Previously on Balls.
Moving from cricket over to rugby, joining us on Balls this afternoon. Well, I mean, you don't have to say anything, just say his name. Dan Retief, welcome to the show.
Yes, hi. How's it going?
Yeah, very well, very well.
Thanks very much, Dan. I'm sure you must have been very impressed with the Springboks' performance overall against Australia, now to number 2 in the world rankings.
I must be honest, I'm not as impressed as most people are. You know, I saw the game live and I sat behind the post, and that sort of was quite revealing. And then I looked at the PVR again, and I'm really calling for feet on the ground, boys. We weren't that dominant. Australia were absolutely decimated by injuries going into the game. And their backline was denuded, and it was completely disrupted during the game. And we really only put them away when they had 14 players on the field. So I'm taking the sort of hard-nosed view. It was a big improvement, and it was good to see us run the ball, but it's a long way from where it could be.
Just to put it into perspective, and a lot of people have been asking why they only gave Johan Goosen 2 chances at goal. He missed those 2 attempts. I mean, that really must have done in the interests of him being such a youngster, and basically to preserve him so that he wouldn't embarrass himself, don't you think?
No, I think what it was about, he's had an ankle heel injury.
Yes. And
apparently where it turns up is when he plants his left foot to kick, then it sort of gets aggravated. And as luck would have it, the very first kick he got was quite a long one. Yes. So he really had to stretch into the bit, and he pulled that. And that might be nerves. We all know from golf that you tend to hit a hook or a pull when you're very nervous. And the next one wasn't the easiest of kicks. It was also over to the left. And then I noticed for the whole of the game he was pulling and fiddling with his left leg. And I think it was that they decided he was injured and not to aggravate it. And Ruan Pienaar has kicked in test matches, so they went there. The one that I was very surprised by, when they finally got poor little Elton Jantjies onto the field, I mean, they got him ready, and it took about 7 minutes of just standing around wondering whether he's going to be a Springbok or not. And then the last conversion was over to his side of the field, the right-hand side of the field. He's a left-footed kicker. And I really would have given him that kick. Can you imagine? He's just made his debut. He knocks the conversion through. It means you have a far more settled player. So, in fact, Elton Jantjies is now still waiting for his first kick in Test match rugby, and you could maybe have got rid of those nerves.
So are you quite surprised then that Ruan Pienaar is likely to continue with the kicking role, despite the fact that he was unsuccessful with half of his kicks at goal against Australia?
Yeah, that is surprising. They seem to be going down that road. He's had 1 or 2 test matches where he was very successful. But you will recall that the reason Morné Steyn became South Africa's very successful goal kicker was because Ruan Pienaar failed against the British Lions. And Morné Steyn took over and also kicked that crucial kick that won the series against the British Lions. And from then on, Morné Steyn was the kicker, while Ruan Pienaar chose to go overseas to Ireland. So Ruan is not the most consistent of goal kickers, whereas the people in the Free State who know Johan Goosen think he could become any day as good as Steyn, as good as Percy Montgomery, as good as Naas Botha, as good as Joel Stransky. So I think it might well be that they're still protecting that ankle.
There have been some suggestions that Morné Steyn's failure with the kicking could be as a result of fatigue, but there is talk coming from the Bok camp is that he could play a very important role, if not a pivotal one, on the year-end tour. Do you think that it is fatigue and that he will get back to his best again?
Well, something about him said that there was something troubling him. You sort of just see an attitude, you see a body language, a sort of a frown on the face that tells you a player is struggling, and there have been some rumours that he's had some personal problems. But the one thing that did emerge is that one of the guys that had played in everything, and it might be that he just got absolutely exhausted by rugby he had to play. And of course, I think when you catch the criticism, that's not the nicest thing to deal with. Every time you open a paper, listen to a radio station, go on social networking, people are having a go at you. And for those of us that don't experience it, it must be quite a hard place to be. When everybody is knocking you down and telling you how useless it is, it must get to you after a while. And I think Heineke Meyer resisted it, but now he's done the right thing. He's taken him out of the limelight. He's letting him get his confidence back. And perhaps seeing a game like Johan Goosen played, where the ball was moving, we were taking the ball going forward, maybe that's all that Morné Steyn needs to sort of slip back into form. And in fact, I hope he does, because he's been a good servant. He's been there when we've won some crucial games. He's played a very big role in winning those games. So I would hate to think that he goes out on this sort of note.
Dan, you said right at the beginning that you weren't overly impressed with the Boks performance. This coming weekend, I mean, the All Blacks look rampant. They really tore the Argentinians apart over the weekend. Do you predict that we sort of like lambs to the slaughter then?
No, I don't think so. I think we'll be competitive. I mean, the playing against the All Blacks always gets the best out of the Springboks. It's the test they look forward to the most. And funny enough, Springboks down the years will say that the biggest motivation they can have is to stand in front of the haka. So it's almost whether the All Blacks should stop the bloody haka if it does that for the Springboks, you know. And the one team that can play the kind of rugby that the All Blacks struggle with is South Africa. The All Blacks like to be dictating terms. They like to be running the ball. They like to be in charge of the collisions. And the team that stands up to them and comes at them in a very physical way is the Springboks. And they struggle with that, although they tend to be just quite often. So I don't think we lambs to the slaughter. We can really stand up to them. What I'm concerned about is there's been some talk emerging from the camp about going back to the kicking game. And I don't think that's the way to go. I think the laws have changed. I think you can't control the ball that well anymore. And sure, you can kick the ball, but kick it judiciously, you know, and let's explore that running game that we had against Australia, against a very weak Australia side, albeit, but we can only get better from there. So I'd like to see us have a dip, and we know the All Blacks they love running the ball. So, I mean, in prospect is a tremendous test match at the FNB Stadium in a hard, fast field, two teams wanting to run ball. I think it could be very exciting.
Sorry.
Dan, just quick question, like injuries to Adam Ashley Cooper, now Frans Steyn, and also now latest rumors that Richie McCaw might sit out next, might take a break before the next World Cup. I mean, I know we all know that they're playing too much rugby, but how much will it take for Sansa to realize that, listen, the Super Rugby competition is too long and it's affecting these guys leading up to a World Cup?
Yeah, and you see Jacques Potgieter gone and Quinny Westhuizen having trouble again. There's no doubt that the problem is that there's too much rugby. So that we've reached a stage in rugby where it's no longer whether you'll get a catastrophic injury. It's now when you'll get your really bad injury and your game-stopping injury, because the numbers just dictate that your turn will come. And the only way to stop that is to play less. And then people rear up and say, but you always get injuries in rugby. Of course you always get injuries in rugby. It's a hard, physical, tough game. Yeah, but less would definitely bring down that average, because players would have a bigger off-season. That means they'd get fitter and stronger. They'd have more time to work on their injuries. And certainly if you look at the averages, if they play less, they're going to get hurt less. And I just think it's lambs to the slaughter. Sorry, not the Springboks and the All Blacks, but in terms of what's happening to the players. They've been treated like foot soldiers who get chased out of the trenches to run into a curtain of bullets every weekend. And something has to happen. But then, you know, would South African Rugby Union stand up to them? I don't think so. You know, because it would appear to me that they're far more concerned about the finances of the game, about keeping the television channels happy, about sorting the kings out. You know, they don't seem to have a focus and to be really set on protecting their players.
And the alternative to that is to move overseas. And that, how much will that hurt your chances of actually playing for the national side if you, for example, you go and play overseas, like I mentioned? Because if you've noticed now, even with the Boks squad, Hanneke Meyer, for example, will choose local players before looking overseas.
Yeah, I think that's the case. You know, funny enough, the country that applies that law most strictly is New Zealand. If you leave New Zealand to play overseas, you certainly don't get picked for the All Blacks, even if they need you. Carl Heyman, the best tight head prop, arguably the best tight head prop in the world, they really needed him for the World Cup, but he was overseas and they wouldn't pick him. And even when they got into trouble with fly half, they wouldn't go overseas. But we've broken our rules so often. I mean, we broke it with Percy Montgomery and Osterrand and the Jake White. Ruan Pinard's been playing overseas. He was brought back. So when we really need a player, we bring him straight back to South Africa. You know, so I think the precedent has been set, But although there were one or two others that people sort of wondered why they weren't brought back, why, for instance, Heineke didn't move to keep Farida Priya, seeing as he wanted him, why he didn't look again at Jacques Fourie. I think the other factor with the guys going over to the Northern Hemisphere is that the money is so good, because you're up against the euro against the rand or the pound against the rand. The value of those two currencies is so much greater than the rand that a young player could, in fact, we see the Northern Transvaal, the Blue Bulls flanker is on his way. Stunde is on his way to do that, and the reason for that is that you could get a reasonably sort of mid-level minor British contract, but when you translate it 10 times into rand, it's a very good thing to do for the rest of your life in terms of the money you'll be able to bank.
Then what do you do with Pat Lambie? So many people calling for him to get a full 80 minutes. But
yeah,
it just doesn't seem to be happening.
I don't know what's going on there. You heard the cheer he got when he came onto the field.
Yes.
And that was a cheer at Loftus-Versfeld, when the Blue Bulls fullback was leaving the field. And I must say, I was very taken with Zane Kirshner, because when he welcomed Pat Lambie onto the field, I thought that was incredibly sporting and very genuinely done. So obviously the spirit in the team is very good. But Pat Lambie, to me, just has so much more football in him than a Zane Kirshner, in terms of joining the line, in terms of being an alternative fly half, coming in at the centre, coming in at the wing. He's very good catching the ball, and he just provides very many more options. And we talked earlier on about a player that looks unhappy, that although he's such a calm little guy that you struggle to see what his emotions are, but he gives me the impression that he's really struggling with what's happening, because he broke into the side, he went to the Rugby World Cup, and now he's just not rated. And all around him, people are saying that he's better than Zane Kirshner. He might get his break this weekend, because Kirshner's struggling with an injury, and that might be that he comes into the side, and then maybe it's one of those situations that he shows how good he is, and he then stays there from then on.
So very important then that we get a win on Saturday to keep the momentum going ahead of 2015 World Cup in England, Dan.
Yes, and another reason we need to get a win is the All Blacks are now up to 15 successive victories.
Yes.
And the record for successive victories is held by them on 17 and also by the Springboks on 17. The Springboks under Nick Mallett and Gary Teichmann got 17. And the All Blacks have got close a number of times to getting beyond that 17. So they're very focused on beating us, because that would be number 16, and then there's another game against Australia. And, so they're very close to setting the record, and I see they talk a lot about it, which means that's what they're focusing on. So they're going to come at us. And that game against Argentina would have really done good things for their psyche, because they know now how good they can be. They love running the ball, but it is a high-risk game, and I think the way to play the All Blacks is to put them under a lot of pressure, not necessarily by kicking the ball at them, because they're very dangerous on the counter-attack, and you don't want to give the ball back to them all the time. But we certainly can beat them, and the times that they've threatened the record and could have beaten it, they were beaten by the Springboks. So I'm sure they're going to be quite nervous about it again.
Well, if you can get your hands on Dan Retief's incredible popular book, it's called The Springboks and the Holy Grail. Just listening to Dan here on Balls Visual Radio is really inspiring, but his book, I can tell you, is also riveting. So get a copy of that book. Dan, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to chat to you.
Super, always a pleasure.
Thank
Look
you.
forward to the next time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye,
Dan.
Bye.
To 6 p.m. Mondays to Fridays live on balls.co.za. Balls.co.za.